Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Poland Daily History. Today we will be talking to our guest, Mr. Krzysztof Jabłonka, a Polish historian, about the role Poland played in the Second World War. The Poles fought with weapon in hand not only in Poland, but on multiple fronts all across Europe. With our guest, we will explore the contributions of Poland in the Second World War. The German attack on Poland is considered the beginning of World War II, and I was wondering if you can explain to me why they make the decision of attacking Poland.
I agree with that. This is why they recently built the Museum of the Second World War in Gdańsk, in order to inform people abroad about the fact that the Second World War started on September 1st, 1939, when Germany attacked Poland. Well, for the French and the British, it actually started on September 3rd, when they declared war on Germany for their aggression. But in practice, the war started in that moment, when the first German bombs were dropped on Poland, because this is the start of the chain of events. We need to state clearly that the initial objective for German aggression was France. At a certain moment, Hitler and his generals realized that Poland will fulfill its obligation as a French ally and attack Germany if they tried to invade France. By the way, the Germans had tried to feel out the Poles to see whether they could be convinced to join forces with Germany, but for that Poland would have to give up the free city of Gdańsk and the so-called Polish corridor, which gave Poland access to the Baltic Sea. So the Poles clearly said no to any such plans. And it's interesting to note that in Hitler's decision it was clearly written, "I wanted to attack France first, but I couldn't be sure that Poland wouldn't attack me if I did so. As a result, I decided to attack Poland first, because I was certain that France wouldn't attack me if I would invade Poland." Those words are one of the greatest examples of praise for the Polish honesty and responsibility for promises it had made and treaties it had signed. The German plan of the invasion and the Polish plan of defense are known quite well by historians. The Poles had one main objective: to make sure that a German invasion of Poland would be transformed into a world war. We had to make sure that we wouldn't be left on our own, to make sure that what had happened to Czechoslovakia wouldn't also happen to us, and this effort succeeded. On the third day of the German invasion, first Great Britain and a few hours later France declared war on Germany. France was initially afraid of declaring war on Germany. They didn't want a repetition of the First World War, but once Great Britain had given Germany an ultimatum and upon not receiving any response declared war, France felt confident enough to do the same. According to the signed military pact between France and Poland, by the 14th day of a German invasion of Poland, France was obliged to invade Germany from the west, so the Polish army had to withstand the German onslaught until that day. This is why the Poles decided to fight an unusually bloody battle, the Battle of Bzura, against the Germans. The Poles suffered more than 12,000 soldiers killed in that battle, which was a multi-layered battle taking place in multiple locations at once. At first, the Polish gained the initiative and were on their way to win the battle. This success forced the Germans to pull away their troops advancing on Warsaw and forcing them to congregate on the famous Bzura River. In the end, it was a battle we had no chance of winning, taking into account the material advantage of the Germans and the fact that they had complete air superiority. However, the bravery of these soldiers and the fact that many of them managed to slip through the German encirclement and head for Warsaw in order to defend the capital city has made them legends of Polish military history. So why did they fight the Battle of Bzura? It was done in order to make sure that our Western allies would fulfill their obligations and attack the Germans in the West. One of the historians who studied the war in France, John Kimche, a Swiss Jew, stated that the bloodiest battle of the Second World War was paradoxically the battle that was never fought. The point made was that if one does not fight the necessary battle in time, then you'll be forced to pay with your blood in numerous following battles. And when it comes to the German plan of attack, the Germans had planned to split Poland up into smaller pieces with the help of the three pincer maneuvers. The first pincer was supposed to cut Poland off from the sea. So here we are talking about the attack on Gdynia, the famous Polish postal office in Gdańsk, and maybe the biggest symbol of them all, the Westerplatte Peninsula, which became an embodiment of the Polish determination to fight back. 182 Polish soldiers on Westerplatte were expected to hold the line for one day, but managed to block the way for a much larger German force for more than a week. A couple of dozen Polish soldiers died there while they were able to kill more than 1,000 German soldiers. The second pincer maneuver was supposed to encircle Warsaw. They were planning on striking in this direction from the north. We must remember that Germany back then was in control of the strategically important province of East Prussia, as well as striking from the southwest, around the city of Wieluń. And finally, we have the third pincer, that is Guderian's mechanized army, which was supposed to advance to the Polish region of Polesie and link up in the eastern city of Brześć. But link up with who? Well, with the Soviet army, which accordingly to the secret plan of the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact signed in Moscow, was supposed to invade Poland 2 weeks after the Germans. However, Stalin decided to wait for news from Abbeville, the French city where a conference was held about whether or not the Western Allies would attack Germany immediately to save Poland. There they decided to stay back, something which was nothing but treason against us Poles.
So would you say that the Soviet invasion in 1939 would be like the final nail in the coffin that pretty much relinquished all hope for Poland to survive the onslaught?
Panuje przekonanie, że Polacy zostali zaskoczeni.
There is a common misconception that the Poles were completely surprised by the Soviet attack on September 17th, but it had been taken into consideration. It was discussed during one of Piłsudski's last meetings with his chiefs of staff back in 1934 when he was still alive. They asked him, "What do we do if we get attacked from both sides by the Russians and the Germans?" Marshal Piłsudski then slammed his fist against the table and said, "Then we will fight on Saxon Square, one of the most central parts of Warsaw." And this is what actually happened in the 1944 Warsaw Uprising. But it is true that it was quite surprising for the world that Communist Russia managed to join forces with Nazi Germany, two ideological arch-enemies. However, the Poles had realized that they were two sides of the same coin. We must remember that National Socialism is related to International Socialism, the ideology which dominated in Russia. It was also important to show the world that the Soviet invasion was not a form of assistance to Poland against Germany, which is the way the Soviets tried to portray it. We must remember that even the Russian public itself was surprised about the invasion. The Soviet soldiers weren't informed about the character of their mission, and they often thought that they are actually marching off to fight the Germans. So, sometimes they were friendly with the Poles when they initially met, but a day or two behind the regular army, the forces of the NKVD, the secret police marched and arrested Polish soldiers. They even killed Polish generals on the spot. There was the famous case of General Olszyna Wilczyński, who was executed immediately after his car had been stopped. They shot him in front of his wife. They tried to force the local population to greet the Red Army as heroes, but apart from parts of the Jewish and Belarusian population, that effort didn't succeed in the slightest. On September 23rd, the Germans and Soviets organized a joint victory parade in the city of Brześć. However, the Soviet invasion made the Polish plans of one final attempt at defense. The plans concerned the so-called Romanian bridgehead. So, what was the Romanian bridgehead? It was the area belonging to Poland, which was located right at the country's border with Romania. It was protected by the Dniester River, and behind us was Romania, with which we had a strong alliance, even stronger than the one we had with France. At the same time, our position would be guarded from the north and west by rivers. Unfortunately, this bridgehead had to be evacuated quickly after the Soviet invasion. After being forced out of Poland, the Polish army moved in 3 directions. Most of the soldiers went to Hungary, a country which has always been our ally. We need to remember that they didn't allow German soldiers to enter Hungary, and the Prime Minister Pál Teleki stated that if the Germans tried to move through the country by force in order to invade Poland, he would rather blow up the country's rail tracks, bridges and tunnels rather than allowing the Germans through. The second direction was to go to Romania, which is also where the Polish government was evacuated. This was done under pressure from the Polish intelligence service and the Polish military, since they feared that the Soviet Union might attack not just Poland, but Romania as well. The Soviet Union actually had such a plan prepared, but instead they were given some Romanian territory by the Germans in 1940 instead. The last unit to fight the Germans was the independent operational group Polessia under General Kleberg, which fought the Russians in the month of September and then fight the Germans at the start of the October. The Germans made another deal with the Russians, thanks to which the Russians withdrew from the Vistula River. Initially, the planned border between Germany and Russia was supposed to be here in Warsaw, at the Poniatowski Bridge across the Vistula. They decided to draw a border along the Bug River, and that's also where the last battle between the Polish army and the Germans took place on October 5, 1939.
1939 roku. I tam skapitulowała owa armia, idąc do niewoli.
Poland was engaged in battle ever since the outbreak of the Second World War, lasting all the way until the last members of the anti-communist resistance movement was hunted down and executed in the early 60s. However, their contributions to the war effort will leave an everlasting impact on history. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily History.